Right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. I am really excited about today's session. This is part two of a four-part series on exploring self-employment, and we have the wonderful subject matter expert, Julie Taylor from Griffin Hammis Associates. And if you weren't able to attend our first session, we have that recorded. And if you don't have the link, let me know. I'd be happy to share it. And we'll be recording every session in case you miss any of the sessions. I'm Amy Dessenberg-Wines. I help manage the Iowa Coalition for Integration and Employment. I would like to thank the Iowa Developmental Disabilities Council for help covering the cost of our platform and closed captioning for these sessions. So I just want to say thank you again, Julie, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amy. Hi, everybody. It's good to see you all. Like Amy said, this is the second session of our four-part series talking about all things self-employment. And if you weren't able to join us last time, I would encourage you when in your free time, take a look at that recording. We talked about just an overview of self-employment and benefits and myths and how to keep our the gates open for folks who may be interested in exploring self-employment to get a chance to do that. And what we're going to do this month and next month is we are going to jump right into talking about how do we do self-employment. Now, mind you, we have an hour and a half or whatever together today. So we're going to cover a lot of information really quickly. To just kind of walk through the different steps of self-employment. We're going to look at this as if there are 6 steps, and we're going to do 3 of them today, and then we're going to do 3 of them the next time that we get together. What I will make sure that we do kind of toward the end of our time is that we want to make sure that you're connected with additional resources. So everything that we talk about today, we have full courses on each of these concepts, right? So, if you're interested in business concept development, there's a course on that. And we only talk about that in that course. And we have these courses are free and available through a project that we have with the federal agency, the Rehabilitation Services Commission and Services Administration, I'm sorry. And so we'll make sure you have the link to that. I did just for starters, go ahead and put that in the chat. It's the Center on Self-Employment.org. And under the training tab, the courses that I'm kind of really briefly running through today are called the core business concepts courses. And they're all available, like I said, for free. You could register and sign up and have them immediately. They're self-paced online. And they do allow you to register for CEUs or CRCs or whatever it is that you need. If you have a, ongoing continuous education, you can get a certificate for that sort of thing too. So, so today we're going to talk about the first 3 of these steps. We're going to talk about exploration of self-employment and of the person who's interested in learning about self-employment. We're going to talk about business concept development, and we're going to talk about feasibility. And we're going to talk about each of those things for 20 minutes or so. And so we're going to really cover a lot and go through it really quickly and just barely scratch the surface. So I will encourage you to get, get a chance to take a look at those other courses if that's interesting to you. So let's get started. So today, like I said, we're going to talk about the first 3 steps of self-employment exploration and have that opportunity to kind of just understand what goes into making sure an employment seeker can learn more about themselves and about their community in order to make decisions about self-employment. And we're also going to talk about the development of business concepts, how that happens and kind of how that comes from that initial exploration. And then we're going to talk a little bit about feasibility, which is the next step where we take what we learned about the person and what we learned about that business concept and try to figure out if it has actual potential to become a business that could help this person meet their financial goals and make money. I mentioned there being 6 steps. There's a little graphic on this page that combines the first and second step. So step 1 is kind of business concept and learning about the person. Step 2 is business feasibility. Step 3, 4, and 5 we'll cover next month when we get together, but those are the actual business planning once we've decided the business is likely to be feasible. And then there's launching the business once like the plan is done and we're ready to get it going. And then there's maintaining a business. And so those will be the things that we talk about next time. And if you have questions as we go through, I welcome those. Just please feel free to, I'll try to monitor the chat. Amy, you and I could probably do that together. Thank you. And then if somebody like raises their hand, I'd much rather you just go ahead and ask it while we're talking about it. And then, everybody I'm sure I always feel like people have the same questions. So everybody, I think, likes to hear. If you have an example, maybe you work in self-employment or you yourself have been self-employed and you want to share something related to this, bring it on. I think that makes our conversation much more interesting than just hearing me talk about it. So I welcome those things. A few objectives for today. We're going to learn about strategies that help employment seekers learn and discover their skills, interests, ideal work conditions, and support needs that can either support them going into wage employment, working for someone else, or open the door for self-employment. We're going to learn ways to support business concept development, and then we'll discuss why feasibility studies are really important to ultimately to getting a business off the ground and to having long-term success. So when we start thinking about what goes into successful early exploration and planning, there are 3 main categories that come up, and these are going to be woven through everything we talk about today and when we meet together next time, and probably when we get together for the 4th session as well. We are always looking to make sure that anything we're thinking about, planning, brainstorming, actively doing with the business is going to consider these 3 things. Number 1 is that the business concept is going to fit the person. And in order to do that, we have to know everything we could possibly know about that person. And then also we have to develop that business concept. Another one of the components that's really important is, so after we've learned those things about the person and developed this concept, is it feasible? Will it make money? And enough money to meet that person's goals. And then the third part of it is, will the person have the support they need to be successful? Everything that we talk about in self-employment today, and I'm going to take the angle of kind of like a customized self-employment, which is a highly person-centered approach, and it assumes a need for support. And so that is one of the components in determining success, is like, what kind of support will someone need and who is going to provide it? And we do that all as we're exploring and planning around a business. So let's talk about making sure that the idea, the concept, is a good fit for the person. So in order to do that, we have to make sure that what the person is planning to do is going to align with their existing skills, their potential for growing skills, like emerging skills, and their interests. It needs to align with what motivates them. It needs to align with whatever the idea is, or the planning that they're doing really has to align with like how much work do they want to do, how many hours a day, from where, with what resources. So whatever the plan is going to be has to really fit with a person. It needs to meet their conditions for employment as well. So it really, we need to know these things about the person and have a way of exploring and really getting to know, what are like deal breakers for the person. They only want to work inside. They only want to work on the weekends. They only want to work 3 hours a day. They don't want to ever have to wear a uniform, whatever it is. We learn about these things. and the business has to, whatever they're doing has to really line up with those things that are important to them. And also we want to make sure that whatever the person is thinking about, whatever concept they're developing, needs to be flexible enough to again align with what that person needs, their support needs, their preferences, all of those kind of things. And so we talked last time about those myths of entrepreneurship. You know, you got to be willing to work 24/7, 8 days a week, right? And you've got to be willing to, you know, sacrifice your personal life and all of these kind of things. And we realize that for most people, that is highly unrealistic, right? And that whatever, you know, and that can be personal preference, that can be that by the nature of their disability, stamina, you know, capacity, all of those kinds of things, that we need to know what that looks like so that the business that's being created can, you know, doesn't kind of, you know, expand outside of what that person is looking to do or capable of doing. So in addition to making sure the concept fits the person, it needs to be feasible. I mentioned the brief definition of feasible is basically that can it make money? So a business idea can be an amazing fit for a person and yet not have a market demand, right? It's possible that, like, you know, it's a really cool idea, but maybe where you live, or maybe there's just no way to price it in a way that any customer or enough customers are going to want to buy it. So this is we'll talk in a little bit today about feasibility studies and the importance of those, but a business concept has to be feasible. Not only must fit with what we know of the prospective business owner. Whenever you see PBO, that's going to be the abbreviation for prospective business owner. So that's someone who hasn't started a business yet, who's curious and like thinking about it. So it must be able to make money. There's got to be some research that provides a foundation, not just us saying, oh yeah, that sounds like that'll make money. We need to make sure that we have like proof of that. All of our brilliant ideas sound like they're going to make money. So we have to like verify that as part of this process. And the goal is to help these prospective business owners to develop successful businesses that come from ideas that are really great match for who they are as a person, but that are also going to be able to bring in enough money to meet their financial needs and goals. And so then that third part of kind of the you know, integral parts of planning, including you know, is it a good fit for the person? Is it feasible? Do we have a way of knowing what the person's support needs are going to be to run this business? And then are those supports going to be available? So prospective business owners have to have access to whatever support they need or want to develop the business, to launch the business, and to maintain the business. So when we talk about support, that is for the life of the business. And it may change the types of support someone needs and who provides them. That may change, but there needs to be support for the development. There needs to be support for like helping someone figure out if they even want to start a business. There needs to be support for doing a feasibility study, for concept development. And then there needs to be support for business plan development, for launching, and then for long-term support, like, you know, and it all varies for every person, like what they want and what they need. A great business that fits the prospective business owner and has the opportunity to make enough money, it's feasible, it still won't work if the person doesn't have the support they need to make it happen. And that's not just true for people with disabilities. So we're not just talking about a disability specific self-employment problem. This is for all businesses, you know, I know some of you probably have had your own like self-employment endeavors, maybe little micro enterprises. Maybe you could do most everything yourself or everything yourself. But most businesses and even large, you know, multinational corporations and there's always support that in some way. There are contracted accountants, there are legal experts, there are consultants who come in and help run the social media, and that is, you know, scaled up for, larger businesses, but still necessary for even those really small businesses that the people we serve are looking to start. So needing support is normal when it comes to self-employment or small business development.
Julie, could I just ask a question?
Sure.
As you're talking about this, I could see where folks might find it overwhelming. Like, oh, that's a lot. And so, if somebody hasn't had that experience in supporting in those different areas, can you talk a little bit about the doability if this is new to you and you're wanting to support someone through this process where it feels like, oh, let's not even think about that because it feels like a lot to do that I don't know a lot about.
Yeah. So I think that, first of all, before you commit to helping anyone start a small business, maybe you're a parent and you're thinking, oh my gosh, my adult child with a disability, I've always thought about doing something like this, right? Or maybe you're a provider, you provide employment support services in the community and you're like, you partner with VR, or maybe you're a VR counselor. I think that before you even start any brainstorming or anything like that, you need to do two things. One is, if you think you want to be involved in providing some support, you need to decide on your level of involvement and get training. Absolutely get training. What I'm giving you today is going to sound like a whirlwind, right? There really has to be, you really have to dig in to understand each one of these things. What I'm doing with you today is not enough for you to go out and be like, I got it, right? This is not enough. It's not enough, right? So those free courses that I've talked about are available to you. And there's multiple, besides these core concept courses, there's business financials courses, there's whatever. I mean, I think that if you're gonna, like, what you need to think about, personally is, what do you envision your role being, right? Because it could be that you're like, I want to be the advocate for this. I want to make sure that my child gets this opportunity, or I'd like to be the one that like contracts with VR to be like a community rehab provider to help people do this. You figure out your role, and then learn as much as you can related to your role, first of all, before you start anything. The other thing I would say, so that's part one, you get trained, you know what you need to know. Part two, I would say, is you cannot do this by yourself. You absolutely have to make connections with the business community in your world. And that is, I think that we talked about that a little bit in the session last time. So, maybe one of the last things we talked about was like additional resources. So I could be mistaken, but what I would say is, you need to know, where's your small business development center? Where's your small business administration? Where in your community are your micro enterprise, like incubators, like some, a lot of times there's these like women's and minority business centers. There's, like Native American business centers. Just find those places in your local community and start making connections. Like many of them will meet with you free to, if you just like, you don't even have to have an idea. You just want to say, I want to learn how to help somebody, or, whatever you want to go and talk about with them. That's what they're there for. I did not include a slide with the list of all of those. And I don't have like Iowa specific resources for you today, but I did have a list of just like in general, here's like 20 community-based business specialists that you should connect with if this is something that you want to do. Even if you have an MBA, right? Master's in business administration. You've started a business. You're a provider that does this stuff. You still have to get connected with the community resources. that know business well. They don't always understand the disability side of things, but that's where you bring your expertise, right? You all know what you do. You know the people that you love or the people that you support, and you can bring your knowledge of that person and their capacities, and then you partner with the people who really know the business stuff. So it's not that you have to know every single thing. Like, how do you read a profit and loss statement, and what are you going to do when about the balance sheet? What you don't I mean, know what they look like, know what goes into them. That's the part you need to know. But there are other people who are experts in that who can partner with you. So be reassured that at the end of this time, if you're like, well, that was a lot that I can't do, that's not what that's not how I want you to leave. What I want you to leave is with an idea of like what goes into this, and then know that it's not all on you, but you do want to be as informed as possible. So is that helpful? Kind of, hopefully. Okay. I see another comment here real quick. Oh, you put the
That's
Amy
perfect.
added the link. Awesome. Good deal.
Thank you.
Awesome. So the first thing that we kind of talked about was one of those critical components being like knowing the person, right? Knowing the prospective business owner. What I want you to know right now is there's no single assessment that's gonna determine if a person can be self-employed or not. There are you entrepreneurial? And like the Small Business Administration has a test that, talks about, it's a whole list of things that, check this box if you can work, 12 hours a day. Like none of those are, and I think I talked about this the last time too. Those are not like validated for serving people with disabilities. They're often not really linked to micro enterprises. They're not a tool that is useful, and I would urge you to don't even bother. There's no point in doing them other than to get the door closed when it doesn't need to be. So there's no like single assessment that's going to determine if a person can be self-employed or not. There's no like specific situation or list of situations or like personality traits that make you either more likely to be entrepreneurial or to make it impossible for you to start a business. Really what we recommend is first of all, having conversations around self-employment with the VR counselor, with whatever provider supports are available, or family members, or natural supports, and then getting connected with the business community to start learning what you can learn. And then also, what I recommend, now coming from a customized employment background, if any of you are familiar with customized employment, what we do is we replace like traditional assessments with this a very community-based active approach called discovery. And that is, if you're familiar with that, I'm just going to give a real brief overview. But with discovery, what we're doing is we're saying anyone, even if they, even if they don't communicate with words, even if they have a behavior plan, even if they need total support for all their personal care, even if they've been employed before or they've never even tried, if they're a teenager in school, if they're 60 years old, it doesn't matter. If someone says, I'm not really sure what I want to do. I think I want to work. I want to learn about like, what does that look like for me? We start with a very person-centered process. And at Griffin Hamlis, we call this discovery or discovering personal genius, where we, and that's a whole nother training. So this is, again, a brief overview on that, but this is where we get out into the community to like actually see and try out tasks and see where someone is skilled, see what motivates a person, figure out how they learn best, how do they communicate, what kind of support do they need, what environmental conditions are going to be best for them. We get out into that kind of that very, very active engagement in communities, in businesses in the community that are going to, give us a chance to kind of come in and try tasks. And I mean tasks like operating the chainsaw, or stirring up, stirring the dough for the cookies, like getting a chance to do something together. And we identify all of these qualities and attributes and characteristics about the person. And sometimes a person will come and know that they're like, I really want to start, I'm curious about being self-employed. And through that discovery process, we can explore, well, what kind of skills and things do you like to do, and tasks and so on could you bring to the world through self-employment? It could be that somebody comes to discovery and just doesn't know. They never even thought about self-employment. And through exploration, we start to think, okay, wait, you've got some skills here that could be, maybe you could work for someone else, but also maybe these are things that you could start a business with. But that approach, that kind of alternative type of assessment that is, allows people that opportunity to get in the community, talk to business owners, right? Talk to other people who are self-employed, learn about what they do, get new ideas about what work looks like. And then identify and exhibit those skills, those interests, and so on. This, in my opinion, is absolutely the best way to start with figuring out what self-employment looks like. Discovery alone does not mean, okay, you're ready to start a business. We still need concept development. We still need feasibility. And then the 3 steps after that before we're there, right? But that community-based active exploration process, in my experience, is the best way to kind of get to know someone, right? And then also get to know the community and explore the wide variety of work that is available to someone. And for those of you, if anybody's here from VR, there's a couple of things that, and we talk about these in these trainings as well, because some of the trainings that we provided at the center are VR specific. So really a lot of like, what do you do with IPE here, and how do you amend it, and what do you, what's going on, all related to self-employment. But there are some, when it comes to like exploring and keeping the door open for self-employment, there are some pre-IPE decisions, like, and that's to, to say, if someone comes and says, I'm curious about self-employment, of course, in the VR role, there's decisions about, well, what more do we need to know about you? And that's not just an entrepreneurial checklist. And what do we need to know about your concept before we can do that? And that, at that point, that could be something where discovery, or like a really good, robust career exploration process maybe is authorized if you're not using a customized employment approach. And then post IPE, when it's like established that this is what somebody wants to do, then an individualized services can be authorized. So a provider that is skilled and qualified to do concept development, to do feasibility studies, to do business planning, can partner. And then, as a team, you all make those decisions. There are some, I think I kind of already talked about the testing, so let me skip over that. There are some various points at which a prospective business owner or a job seeker comes into the path to explore self-employment. One of the points may be that someone, and this is probably more toward VR, and maybe this could also be like, maybe you all have somebody that you love, or somebody that you support who already is at one of these stages. But one of the points could be that someone comes to VR, or you already know somebody who they've already like started a business plan. Like, I just met with a lady in a different state the other day who wanted some advice, and she already had a business plan. We're done, right? And we kind of had to back things up a little bit and start thinking about maybe what else is needed. But so if somebody comes with a business plan already done, or if you already have a business plan done and you're like hearing this today and you're like, what do I do now? It is not too late to take a look at the prospective business owner and assess whether or not you know enough about the person to move forward, right? So there could be a really great business plan, but like, have you really thought about, does this align with who you are as a person or who this person is? So it could, even with the business plan, there could still be a need for discovery. There could still be a need for better concept development. Or it could be really thorough and it could be really well matched. So, but that's one point of entry. Another point of entry is that the person has an idea or a work goal that aligns with self-employment, but really it hasn't really gone past that. Like maybe they've already been thinking about self-employment, but and maybe have a little bit of a concept, but they haven't developed it. Again, at that point, it might be important to think about, do we know enough about you? Do you know enough about yourself to like identify what skills you bring to this business, or, you know, what are those capacities that you have? And it could be that like that discovery process is needed at that point. Also, another point of entry is that someone comes with some already known, some interests, skills, conditions that could align with self-employment. And again, we want to look at, is that sufficient for us to then say, okay, that's cool. Maybe we still need a discovery process to explore concept ideas a little bit. Or maybe it's not needed. Maybe that's already kind of in the works and you just need support for business concept development. And then another point of entry could just be that someone comes and says, I'm interested in self-employment. I've heard about it, but I don't really know anything about it. And again, that's a point where definitely there needs to be some person-centered planning, like discovery or whatever, to ensure that those skills and those attributes are identified and those beginning early ideas are kind of rise to the surface that can be explored further. So when we think about the process of self-employment and for someone who's receiving like VR support, someone who has a disability, versus the process of self-employment for other business owners who don't have disabilities, the process is really not all that different. The one thing I would say that we see, well, maybe two things are that the discovery process is something that someone who's receiving supports might get. I would, however, say that it's while someone without a disability who's starting a business may not have a formal discovery process, they typically have had work experience or community, just life-related community-based exploration that has informed their own knowledge about their skills and about their interests. And so they've had, an extended decades of discovery that just kind of happens naturally when you have access to resources, when you have access to community, when you have people who are giving you opportunity. We know that many people we serve have not had that same level of experience. And that's why we have a discovery process, is to say, let's get out and have these experiences that help you learn more about yourself, that help you learn more about the world around you, because it may have been limited due to lack of resources, due to not having someone in your corner, making sure that you have those opportunities, kind of as you've moved into adulthood. So discovery is a service someone might get if you receive VR services that someone who doesn't receive VR services might not get in the business planning, but everybody's getting discovery one way or the other, right? But the business planning and having a team around you, that is normal for anybody starting a business. Spending time in concept development and having support to do so, that is normal. Feasibility studies, market research, having experts walk you through that, give you the templates, talk to you about what goes into that, that is normal. Business plan development, absolutely. People go to experts to get that done all the time. Securing funding, whether that's like, you're bootstrapping it, putting your own money into it, or you're getting VR funding, or getting a loan, or a, crowdsourced funding, or whatever it is. People have to make those kind of decisions. So trying to secure funding is universal when it comes to starting a business. benefits analysis, that would be something that is unique probably to most people with disabilities. Having support for that. And then also needing long-term support, that is all normal and to be expected as well. So sometimes we'll hear people talk about how much support it takes to help someone with a disability get a business started and keep it going. And like I said, that is just that's just what it takes to start a business and keep it going. Not, you can leave the for people with disabilities like out of it. That's just what it is. And so accessing all of these resources is really important. Give me 1 second. Okay, so little bit of a, introduction to what we need to do to help the person, like to understand a person, help them like know enough about themselves to know like what might self-employment look like. What skills and so on does the person bring to the world of work that could really fit in with self-employment. My suggestion is a really good, robust discovery process that's not just focused on self-employment, that's focused on really getting to know the person and exploring the community and kind of seeing if that starts to point toward self-employment, for that person. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about this idea of business concept development. So a business concept is the foundational idea for a business that includes information about what they want to do. The product they're thinking about creating, they want to make quilted purses, okay? Or the service they want to deliver. They want to have a mobile dog toenail trimming company. So it's this idea, right? It also, as we define the business concept, because a lot of times it kind of starts with a really big idea and then we start to refine it a little bit by thinking about some specifics. But at this point with the business concept, it's brainstorming. It can be like pie in the sky that we then have to do more research to sort of, figure out. We come up with an idea. We also think about who we want to serve, right? So what's our goal? Like who's our target market? Who are the customers in our mind going to be? And then also something that we call like a unique selling proposition. So it's something that's like, why would people want to buy this product or this service? This is part of the business concept. Like, what is it about what you want to do that you think people are going to want to buy? And what we mean, like a unique selling proposition might be that it's really, it's like a lifestyle brand. It's expensive, but makes people feel like they're wealthy and so they want to buy it, right? That's like, let's think about, I already know the name of the company I want to talk about, but I'm not going to say it because I don't know if I can actually publicly say the name of a company like that. But there are some really high-end companies that sell really, really, really expensive like workout clothes. Okay. And like you can get the workout clothes someplace else that's not that expensive, but it just comes with like a lifestyle vibe to it, right? So that can be a unique selling proposition. It could be that it's like something that's discounted and easy to access, or it's holistic, or it's environmentally friendly. Those are the kind of things that kind of go into business concept development. When I don't know if I mentioned to you all before, I may have when we met, but one of the businesses that I started was a really small home-based bakery and catering company. And so I did that like by myself and did it for a couple of years and found, that it wasn't something I wanted to do long term, but it was a really, really cool experience. But part of my unique selling proposition was that I was using like all natural ingredients and locally sourced whenever possible. So I was buying rolled butter from the Amish dairy that I would put into the pie crusts. And I would buy either like I have a garden, and I have a part of my garden is like a berry garden. And so I would either be using the berries from my own garden, or I would be getting berries from local farmers to put into the pies, So like I like had that, like, that was like my little niche, right? That people thought, oh, that's cool. So anyway, business concept considers those kinds of things kind of loosely. So we haven't gotten to the feasibility part of it where we really research and figure out what makes sense. Is it affordable? Is it going to make money? But it's the idea of who do we want to be? What do we want it to look like? A business concept can involve the development of a whole brand new product that nobody's ever done before, something really, really innovative, or a new service. Or it could be a novel approach to something someone's already doing, to just like a new way of doing things that maybe isn't being offered in the community. And it could also be a similar, something that's really similar, but that maybe there's just not enough of, so there's a market for it, or maybe we're marketing in a different way, so it's reaching different customers. But that's part of that business concept development. This is really the idea generation stage that occurs before the nuts and bolts of business planning. I would say that when people come, and if anybody's here from VR and you've had some self-employment experience, you might know better about this in your world. But in my experience, when I've worked with people on self-employment, a lot of times they have a loose concept. Like they have an idea of what they want to do, and it feels like a really great idea. And it's usually just it's big and it's broad and hasn't been analyzed and figured out like the nuts and the bolts of the planning. Could this actually, can actually get this off the ground? Do I actually have the capacity for this? Can this actually make money? They haven't gotten that far, and that's okay, because it has to start with an idea. It has to start with a concept. I have a bit of a entrepreneurial mindset, so I probably get a new business idea every day, but most of the time I have to be like, that's dumb. When are you going to sleep? You can't do that. Most of my business ideas, I shut them down myself because of my own capacity and lack thereof. So anyways, as the concept evolves, there becomes more of a detailed description of the idea, and we start thinking about it in terms of how it connects with the customer. Who is this customer, and would they buy this, and what would it look like to them, to have this product or service. Also, part of that business concept development process, we go back to one of those key points of needing to remember constantly, does this fit? Does this concept and what I'm thinking of and what I'm beginning to brainstorm, does it fit with the employment seeker skill set, interest, motivations, personal capacity, flexibility, all of those kind of things? It's like knowing that we have to know that stuff really well before we start. You have to know that stuff really well before you start trying to find somebody a job working for anybody else. Really, you need to know these things. And we also really need to know them when it comes to self-employment. So we need to, as we have this concept and we're exploring it, we want to be looking back at what we know of the person to make sure that it always aligns. The product that they want to make, is that going to align with the skill set, with the resources they have available? Is it something that, it takes hours and hours a day to do, but the person only wants to work a couple of hours? Either they, it's not a good fit, or there's going to have to be that support in place to make sure that that the thing can be accomplished, even when the person isn't, doesn't want to continue doing it. There are also there are always the customer considerations with concept development. This we really look at with feasibility, so we'll get to that here shortly. We find that in business concept development, as we spend a little bit of time working on it, we do that refinement. It could be that the person has a really great idea, but maybe the way that they're currently, maybe let's just go back to the idea of making purses. Maybe they're sewing purses and they're doing, they're using a certain type of sewing machine to do it. And, they're purchasing items at retail cost that go into making the purses. And they want to have a business where they're making these quilted purses, but it's, just in looking and exploring that concept a little bit, it's it takes a really long time because of the type of sewing machine that they have, and maybe the purses that they've been experimenting with are just really too big. We don't think a customer would actually purchase them. And maybe, they're trying to buy things at retail, and that's something they're never going to make up that cost. There's no way they could price the purse in such a way that they can make up that cost. And so this is where the concept, we start refining it and thinking about, okay, well, wait, like it could be that like with a better sewing machine and a smaller purse, and you buy these buckles wholesale, that as you change it up a little bit, there's more potential that this concept could actually become something. So concept development starts with a spark. We think really big and really creative and generate all these ideas. We can start to think about the person again and how this idea fits with them. And then there's this refinement stage that happens in concept development, where we start thinking about a little more realistically what could actually be accomplished. See, I'm going to go back to this. A lot of times people will have an idea for a concept that stems from their own experience. So sometimes this is like a hobby that they have. Sometimes it's from something they've done previously for work, and they have an idea of how they would like to do it through their own business, or they have an idea of how they would change it, and start a self-employment opportunity to do that. And those are all, and somebody maybe has just seen something or been like, this is what happens with me a lot of times. I'm out somewhere thinking, why didn't somebody come up with this? Like there's a solution, there should be a solution to this problem in my community. So people have lots of ideas. They've seen something, they know somebody who does something, they have experience, work experience or life experience, a hobby, whatever it is that sparks this concept idea. We again want to remember that's a great, all those things are really great starting points. They really are. And that the point is going to be to kind of go through the whole process to refine that idea, and then start moving into that feasibility stage of things. Some of the things that we think about to determine whether or not this concept is going to be a good fit. One of the things is, does it match the interests that were identified for the person? What are the major tasks that would go into actually doing this, making the purses? What goes into that, right? So let's just use that example again. The concept is I want to make quilted purses. That means, some of the tasks off the top of my head are going to be like ordering inventory, which includes the fabric, I personally am not a sewing person, so I'm gonna make stuff up here, but the thread, the equipment, the right sewing machine, scissors and buckles and snaps and buttons and all patterns or whatever, all these things, all those things have to be acquired and purchased. There's also the tasks involved in the actual doing of the work, that is, operating the sewing machine or doing stitching by hand, or, putting the buckles on, measuring. So the creating of the thing. And then there are also tasks that involve getting that product to the market. And that means figuring out who's your customer and how are you going to reach them? Where are they located? Are you going to be online? And then how are you going to tell your customer that you exist? Is there social media involved? Are you going to go to a farmer's market and try to sell some purses and get some feedback? That's another major task, is connecting, right? And involved in that is like packing stuff up, putting it in the car, getting it where it needs to go, setting up, or shipping things to people if you're doing these kind of things online. So through the concept, we don't have to be absolutely precise through concept development, but we do start thinking about, okay, purses, great idea. We don't just jump into the plan. We start thinking about what goes into that, right? What do we imagine goes into that? Maybe do a little bit of light research around that. And then again, compare what goes into that with what we know of the person. And it could be that there are major tasks that the person can do independently or with a little bit of support. It could be that there are some major tasks that the person is not at all interested in doing, like maybe handling the money or, being the one that ships things. Maybe they don't want to do those things, or that's not within their capacity to do those things. That does not, hear me on this one, that does not mean that it's not a concept that can't be a possibility for them. It can still be a possibility. It just brings us to that idea about the supports. If it's a concept that could work, and there's some parts of it that the person doesn't want to do or can't do for themselves, then we move into that kind of next phase of thinking about is what supports would be needed, and are those supports available? We want to consider when we're thinking about the fit again with the person is, can the product or the service be delivered within the ideal conditions? Like, so if the person only wants to work 3 or 4 hours a day, like how long does it take to make the purses? And how long does it take to get them to the market and do the shipping and whatever? And can that be done within the person's desired, availability? And then if not, is there support to help with that? Thinking about the time commitment, thinking about the preliminary financial considerations for the concept. Like, the other day I was working with somebody whose business idea is going to take like $12,000 to just get it started. And looking at like their kind of rough idea was that was a real tight kind of conservative amount of money. I always think things take a lot more time and money than we plan for in my experience. And so, the person, looking at the person's like projections and their own personal goals about how much money they wanted to be earning, it's like they weren't going to start making a profit for like 2 years. So they wouldn't be able to pay themselves, right? And so just those kind of things, we might not know them like with absolute precision in this concept development phase, but they are things we want to start thinking about, like, and brainstorming about how long do we think that's going to take? And like, how much would somebody pay? And again, it's our best guess at this point, but we have to think about it to determine if that concept is fleshed out enough, what kind of support we might need, and then being able to kind of move into that idea of researching for feasibility. Let me see here. Some preliminary research can be done during concept development. And we're going to do a lot more research in feasibility studies, so we'll talk about that shortly. But the the ideas around how long does this take? Where do we buy our fabric and how can we get it less expensive? All those kind of things. We can start doing some of that research during this stage and getting an idea that informs the concept. We want to make sure that we're having an objective perspective. This can be really difficult when we're excited about something. This for me, when I was doing my pie business, was like, I loved baking the pies and the cupcakes and the cakes. I loved doing all those kind of things. But I had never experienced getting up in the middle of the night to bake 25 pies at one time before having the order, right? Never practiced it. It sounded fun until I did it, right? Same with like, what's it like to transport 250 cupcakes to a wedding? Like, what is that really like? And some of these things we can only give it our best guess and think, yeah, it's okay. And then we do it and we're like, I don't ever want to do that again. So that a little bit of research, talking to other business owners through the discovery process, reading as much as we can, maybe even trying it out, and doing a little bit of testing can give us a more objective perspective around what actually has to happen. Like I said, everything in my opinion takes more time and more money than we planned for. And getting a little taste of that early on can be helpful. Every idea that someone has for a business, and sometimes people come, they want to be self-employed and they have a lot of ideas. And so we're helping them explore what one's going to be the best fit for you right now. What's the concept that might be more likely to be successful and satisfying for you. So those each have to be evaluated to ensure which are the better fit, which are worth pursuing, which should at this point in time be either discarded or set aside, and get that preliminary understanding, and that we will then say, okay, this is what I know of this concept right now is enough that I could move this forward. It's worth now researching and doing like a real feasibility research. Another thing about concept development is that while it is something that happens really early on in the business pre-planning process, this is before we even know if there's going to be a business, concept development is also something that should be done through the life of the business. Someone who takes a concept and finds out that it's feasible and builds a plan and gets funding and launches that business and is now running that business is still going to continuously have to evaluate what they're doing. Does the customer still want it? Is it becoming obsolete? Do I need to be more inventive? Do I need to market it differently? Should I add a service or a product? Should I, stop using, these ingredients and start using these? Like that continuous improvement is essential for long-term success. And so, we start with something, and usually what I suggest is a concept that's like bite size, right? Something that you can handle and start with and really, really focus on. Get that down, get that up and running, start making money, and then add on to that concept, like add an additional product, add an additional service, refine it, whatever. Listen to your customer about what they want, change things a little bit. It really has to kind of be woven through the entire life of the business. So, another thing that goes into the concept development considerations is, I mentioned this earlier a little bit, like really already early on starting to think about the customer, because the customer is the one that will pay for this, right? They're the one that's going to buy the product or the service or not buy the product or the service. And so without a customer, you don't have a business. You have a hobby that's not making any money. So the customer is really, really critical from the very beginning to start thinking about, cool, you have this idea of the purses. Interesting. We've played with a little bit with what does it look like to create that? What would a day in the life, what all the tasks are, all this kind of stuff, but like who's going to buy it? So thinking about the customer from the very beginning is critical. And so we ask questions like, does this concept, is there someone who's going to buy it? Does it meet a customer's need? And who is that? Who will buy this? Is there a demographic? Is there a neighborhood? Is there a specific community across the country that you're going to reach through your website? We also start thinking about what would a customer be willing to pay for this? And we do some of that early research around, well, other people who are selling quilted purses are selling them for this price. And, they have a brand name, so they get more notoriety, so they can actually expect that customers are going to pay for them. I'm coming in with, nobody knows me. And it's really hard for me to compete with those like higher end, products. So, what would a customer be willing to pay for what I'm doing here? And why? What is it about my product that they would be willing to pay for? Maybe they'll pay more because they shop local. Maybe that's what you're trying to do, is your customers, your local base, and maybe there's a street market once a month in a really wealthy area of town, and you're planning on selling a high-end product, and that's where you're going to find your customer. We think about, how will the customer learn about what I'm doing? How will I connect with them? That's marketing. We're not going to really dig too deep on marketing. We'll talk about it a little tiny bit in our next session together. That's part of your business plan. Is the marketing is basically means connecting your product or service with the customer, and it's it's product placement. It's what form of advertising you're doing, like using social media or putting out a sign or sending out flyers or coupons or whatever. And then also another part of the customer focus is, how is the person going to buy this? So is it going to be in person? Am I going to have a business within a business? So they come to a store to buy it? Am I going to be at a market? Is it going to be online? Am I selling it through like Etsy or eBay or through my own just online store? But these, again, we don't know for sure exactly how it's going to pan out, but we do think about these customer connections during that concept development. So I'm going to pause for a moment. We've talked about fit, rapid fire, and then we've also talked about concept development. Really quick overview before we move into talking about feasibility. Any thoughts or questions related to assessing, what somebody's good at, and then also concept development? Anyone's experience with that you want to share? All righty. Let's move on to talking about feasibility. So I'm going to go over a couple of key definitions related to feasibility. Let's just throw those out there right now so that we have a little bit of an understanding of what that looks like. So to be feasible, this is what, when I showed that picture of the little stool with the 3 legs, these are the 3 parts of feasibility. The business owner can do the tasks. We know them well enough to know that they can do the tasks they want to do. That second part is they have the support to do necessary tasks that they're not able to do or don't want to do. And then there's that financial feasibility component. The business can make money to cover the costs. They can make a profit, which means more money comes in than goes out. They can pay themselves their desired income, which should be, our expectation should be minimum wage or higher. And that really kind of means that there's a return on investment. That's business language for basically saying that the person is going to make enough money to not only cover their costs or break even, but there's more coming in. It is profitable. More money is coming in to the business than is going out. Another term important to feasibility is this idea of market research. This is the process of gathering, analyzing, and interpreting information about a potential market so that we can get an understanding of who the customer is and if there will be a demand for the product or service. Is there a market? Will somebody buy this? A feasibility study is sometimes the language is used interchangeably, like we'll say market research and feasibility study. A lot of times people will say, we're going to do our market research. That is a feasibility study. Sometimes we'll say feasibility study. There's always a market research component to that. So they can be used somewhat interchangeably. A feasibility study is the process of examining comprehensive aspects of the potential business, its products, its services, the concept, and then that market information, the customer, to determine if and how the business is likely to succeed. With feasibility studies, we're often creating some like projections, which are basically like our very best guess about how much something's going to cost, and then our very best guess about how much we expect to be able to do in sales. And then looking at different points that help us determine like if and when this business can break even, which means make as much money as we've spent, right? And then also make a profit. There are a couple different types of market research. There's direct market research, primary market research. This means we are collecting information directly. And usually that's something like doing a test market, going out and meeting customers, doing a survey. There's also indirect market research, which is like typically online research, where we're looking at facts and figures, like how many t-shirts got sold in, online in 2023. It's a lot of data that we use to kind of prove that there is some market there's a customer base for this sort of thing. It just gives us that kind of often data, numerical type data related. So there's a little bit of difference. Direct market research is work that we do. We talk to other business owners, we meet with customers, we try things out, and get our own experience about our product in our community. And then there's that indirect, that's just a broader, like more online type of research. And I want to make sure that we're kind of, we have an understanding of the difference between like a feasibility study and a business plan, because sometimes people get these things confused. So a feasibility study is done before actual business planning. We don't move into business planning unless we have an understanding that there is a likelihood of this business being feasible. It's a lot of wasted time to do a business plan and not know whether or not you have a chance of this selling. A feasibility study addresses questions like, is this a viable business concept? Viable meaning, will it make money? The information gathered during market research and feasibility will be used in the business plan. So if a feasibility study and market research is done well, it makes business planning significantly easier, because you may have to do some, like maybe some refinements to your, you do feasibility study, maybe you find out some things that need to be changed to make it more attractive to the customer, or your numbers, like your projections around your earnings, maybe need to be revised. You can do that, but then you already have that done to put into the business plan. So the thing that makes a business plan different is that it is going to use what was learned in the feasibility study to outline what steps actually need to be taken, kind of like a roadmap, to turn this idea, this concept into reality, that a business could actually get off the ground based on this roadmap or this plan. It's going to talk about how the business will be created and launched. That's the planning part. The feasibility tells us, is it worth it to launch it? The plan says, we learned that it was worth it. Now we're planning on how we launch it. But the two really do go hand in hand, and the feasibility study feeds into the business plan. Market research and feasibility studies are very frequently the most either like ignored and not completed step in the business planning, or definitely shortchanged and not done very thoroughly. And that's unfortunate, because for a number of reasons. If we put that effort in early on, the planning and the launch have so much more likelihood of success. And they also like use information. You don't have to redo it. Like, you use information that you gathered early on. This is also true of like a really good discovery or career exploration process. You do that first, and you learn about the person first, so that you're not making a plan to build a business that doesn't align with who this person is, right? Know who the person is, develop the concept, do the feasibility study, and then your business plan is, as long as it all is like, yes, move forward, your business plan is ready to go, and your business is looking like it's in a good position to launch. Feasibility studies are really important because it absolutely helps us to understand any potential risk. And by risk, mostly I mean financial risk, but I also would mean that the risk that the person isn't going to find that the work that they're doing is a good fit and not want to do it after all this time and funding probably has been invested. So feasibility studies help us understand the risks and then think about ways that we can mitigate those risks, like plan around, like contingency plan around that. Feasibility studies are going to demonstrate for us whether or not the business concept has a chance of being viable. Feasibility studies bring to light and like significant barriers. We should expect in a feasibility study, we're going to run into some things that we're like, oh, okay, that's not what I expected. Like, I thought there'd be more of a customer base, but actually out of 20 people I interviewed, only one said they would buy this product. Like it gives us like red flags that don't necessarily mean that the concept isn't viable. They could, but it may just mean that there needs to be some refinement, some additional support, some different way of doing things or marketing things to improve success. And so a lot of times with feasibility studies, we will learn some things that we have to change, and we kind of go back to the drawing board a little bit on the concept, make those changes, and then do reevaluate like a smaller scale feasibility study around those changes. That is not unusual. So again, this is not a process that is unique to self-employment for people with disabilities. This is the business development process for every business. It's the multiple iterations. Think about even like how many companies have tried to launch, like Coca-Cola, for example. If any of you are old enough to remember when there was this like classic Coke and then like new Coke, right? They came out with a new Coke 30 years ago or whatever. And like nobody liked it. Nobody wanted it. But like, so I mean, even at that level, we're trying new stuff and we're testing it out and we're finding out, well, that's not going to fly. And so it's not unusual, but we want to know this before we invest money and do a business plan and launch a business. We want to know this. So we use the feasibility we're always hoping that it tells us go, go, go. Perfect. You got it all lined up. But there are going to be things in the feasibility study that don't work. That is normal. We don't have to shut it down right then and there unless it's like really not a good fit. We bring it back to the drawing board, fiddle with things, rethink it, get the team gathered around to think that through, and then move forward with that better idea, that better iteration of the idea. All of that good work just equates to more opportunity for long-term success. Some of the things that happen in a feasibility study, some elements typically are that assessment of who is the customer. Are there enough people who are willing to buy this, willing to pay for this? What are they willing to pay? We do those business projections, like how much do we expect to sell? How much do we think things are going to cost? Where's our net profit or net loss? How long might it take for us to get to a point where we're actually bringing in enough money? Typical business projections don't show a profit in the first several months. Like you haven't when you launch a business, it takes a while for you to ramp up to the point where you are you've made contact with enough customers that you're selling enough product that it's going to bring in a profitable money. So usually we see losses in those first several months. That's really, really normal. And there'll be ebb and flow. Even when a business is launched, there will be times where the business is more profitable than others, right? And it depends on kind of the nature of the business. But we kind of create these projections that help us to think about what this might look like. During feasibility studies is a good time to get like a list of what we think are all of the startup items that are needed. What are all the startup expenses, machinery, product, tools and supplies, whatever. We list those kind of things out because that helps us to know, well, I know I'm going to need, $2,500 and start making a plan around how we're going to get that. This is also a good time for people to start thinking about that funding, like what part of that might my state's vocational rehabilitation be willing to pay? How do they do that? Because typically most states don't just give you $2,500 and let you just go and do whatever you want with it. Like there's a plan around making those purchases, usually like through a third party to buy the items that you need. So we want to think about what VR might fund. And then, so if there are products or services or licensure that you need, or like space you need to rent or insurance you need to buy, then maybe VR won't provide for? What's our idea around how we're going to get that money to pay for those things that VR isn't going to fund? That's something that it's important for everyone to realize, that your state VR has a policy that really kind of explains like the process that is required, like who does the feasibility studies and what does your VR counselor need to see and agree with in order to move forward. And then, if you're moving forward into planning, what expenditures is VR willing to support? And sometimes VR has like a requirement that the person contributes something, either something they already own, like that sewing machine, and they, are using that like in kind sort of thing, or, the person needs to, come up with some other funding to balance things out. So we think about that and start brainstorming that during feasibility. There are always risks associated with starting a new business, even if our feasibility study is beautiful and like shows that it's all going to work out with no problems. That isn't going to be true. So there are always risks that come up when we're starting a new business. This is true for businesses started by people with disabilities. This is true for businesses started by people without disabilities. This is true for people who have advanced degrees in business, and it's true for people who have, trying this for the first time. It's true for business owners who've had successful ventures in the past. It's true for Coca-Cola company. It's true for, Dave's lawn mowing service. It's true for people who are starting their first business. There's always risk, and risk is, just to kind of briefly thinking about risk is, there's 1,000 different things, right? There's a pandemic, right? People started businesses in March of 2020, right? Opened a restaurant, and then there's a pandemic, right? So there are huge risks like that. They're just unfathomable. We never would have known that would have happened, right? There are other risks where we just made some faulty calculations. There are risks where you decided you're opening up a quilted purse company and you didn't know that somebody else was also opening up one just down the street. Like, there are so many things that go into this, and the best we can do is thorough research, know our communities, make sure it aligns with the person. One thing I would say about money is I am not a huge fan of loans for small micro enterprise first-time business owners, because you start out with debt. You're just starting with debt, and you don't know how long it's going to take for you to make enough money, not just to break even, but like to be able to start repaying that debt. And I've talked to a lot of people who started with debt, with big ideas about how much money they were going to bring in, and instead of being able to pay themselves a wage, they're paying off their debt. And that's a heavy load to bear kind of really early on. One of the biggest risks, I think, is kind of getting in over your head. Like, I'd much rather advise someone to start small with, VR funding, with, if you have any kind of savings, or, like an ABLE account or anything like that, with a family members that would be willing to give you, like, maybe give you a loan or give you a gift or something small, right? And then reinvest in the business as you start making money and growing things that way. We call that bootstrapping, but kind of putting any profits back into the company so that you're funding yourself. But it might take a little bit longer, but it's a lot less risky. Now, don't take that as being, there isn't room for, there's room for loans. It just depends on do the feasibility study to determine if that makes sense for that person. We already kind of, we talked a little bit about the different elements of the feasibility study, but there are three other things to think about. One, the business owner; two, the team; and three, the market and industry. We we've already really kind of talked about how important it is to have the knowledge of the person, preferences, skills, and how everything really aligns with who they are. The team really equates to that necessary support, really beginning to identify who is going to help the person at every stage. Could be VR partners, could be those community economic development organizations that I talked about earlier, that I strongly advise, if this is something you're at all thinking about in your future, helping with this, just start getting connected and make those relationships. Partners can be lenders, they can be family members, they can be other local business owners. Again, really advise you to get to know the business owners in your community, especially the small business owners, who can just talk about what it's like to be self-employed in your community. Like, what did they do to get started? What kind of advice and guidance would they give to somebody who's thinking about that? All of these components are important. And then it's also, as we've kind of talked about, understanding the market and the industry, really important to fully understand what it looks like to run this business. And can we build a solid customer base? Is there going to be demand? Can we compete with that other person that opened up a purse factory yesterday? Can we build and ramp up our production capacity? Can we generate sufficient income? All those financial matters are important. There are ways that we can do, I talked about direct and indirect market research. There are ways that we can do these things. Usually through a feasibility study, most states VR will fund a feasibility study. So they'll pay a provider partner to assist with that. They won't, typically there is some type of certification or training requirement or whatever, needs to happen, for someone to be qualified to be paid to assist with that. You definitely want somebody who knows what they're doing to assist with doing any of these things. But some of that direct market research is going to include things like talking to other business owners about what they do, asking potential questions of customers, doing a survey, doing a test market. Our Ohio's VR, several years ago, I was helping somebody. Ohio's VR provided a little bit of funding for someone to create a product as part of their feasibility study, actually. And we went to a night market. They were an artist that was turning their art into like journals and different products with like the art on the covers and things like that. And so they let us create some of that. And then VR even paid for us, it was like $25 to rent a table at this market and so on, to go out and just test market this. Would people be willing to buy this? Especially at a market where there's 20 other artists also trying to sell their stuff, right? So you're competing, even though the art is different, you're competing for people's dollars. That's direct market research. And then I mentioned earlier that indirect is that stuff you can do online, look up trade associations, Google searches around, the number and percentages and so on. We're kind of coming close to the end of our time, so I want to make sure that I can get to point. What I'll do is, because I do think I probably don't have time to go into all this detail, but what we'll do is make sure you have these slides, and I'll point you into what I've got in here for you. What I have is information on how we do feasibility studies. So this is like, if you're going to be someone who does a feasibility study, please make sure that you're getting way more training than this. This is not sufficient, right? But this information is in that training that I referenced earlier. So part of a feasibility study is to gather industry information. And so in this PowerPoint today, I have a list of the kinds of things that you would want to know, but you will also see that if you take that other training. So like, what specific products are going to be offered, how are they going to be produced and delivered, and so on. There is a need to research the local community, the local business community, and to learn about what's the competition and where's the need and so on. There is a need to identify the customers. And so this kind of these kind of questions help you think about that. Thinking about potential competitors, also really important. Those financial projections are all listed there. The person's capabilities, the business owner's capabilities. The second step is testing. So doing that kind of direct market research, that there's a number of bullets here on kind of what would go into that. Different testing strategies, including like selling a few, giving away free samples and getting feedback. Test marketing, really helpful stuff, doing those surveys. And then probably the most important part of the feasibility study is to evaluate what you learned. Compare it all to what you know of the prospective business owner. Think about, from a VR perspective, think about, is this really thorough? Are there any questions unanswered? Are there big red flags that need to be, better fleshed out, or, explained better, or take it back to the drawing board and change it? And then we kind of, by doing all this and really evaluating everything and doing it very objectively and very critically, we think about, is it a go, right? Did we learn enough through this that says we can move forward with this into business planning because this has a likelihood of being successful? Or as it stands right now, this doesn't seem like it's a viable business. This doesn't seem like it's going to match with the person, or that the supports are going to be available, or that this can make the right money. And then we need to make decisions around, well, what else do we need to try or think about or change to be able to then move it forward. All right. So did you learn like everything you needed to know about the first 3 steps of business planning? In the last couple of minutes, I'd be happy to take your questions. Again, disclaimer, that's a lot. Just a brief overview though of everything that goes into this. So get more training. Check out centeronselfemployment.org under the training tab. Lots of really great stuff there. This information comes from the core concepts training series. And so each one of these topics has its own like full training module that goes into a lot more detail, a lot of examples, and then also get connected to your communities, to your business resources in your communities would be my greatest advice to you. All right. Any questions or comments?
Feel free to unmute yourself, or you can type things in the chat. Do you have any questions or comments? Just a reminder, and it's up on the screen right now, which is great. Our 3rd session in this series is May 9th, and it'll be 1 to 2:30. And then our 4th will be June 13th, 1 to 2:30. I will be sending out the link to this recording, as well as the materials and the Center on Self-Employment. You can see it's on the screen here. And that's a great place to check out as well. Julie, thank you so much. That was fabulous. And I know it feels like a lot of information, really important. I think for me, just kind of hearing these pieces and knowing, how do I then begin to build my skill set so I can help somebody navigate that process and feel good that we're doing what we need to do to try to set up a successful situation. So we'll stay on for just a minute or two. And if folks have any questions or comments, please feel free to stay on and throw those out there. Otherwise, I hope that we see you on May 9th.